Salutations, everyone. This is Razor giving you guys another podcast. I know it's been a while. I had some planned with some guests, but things got in the way. So I decided enough's enough. I'm just going to do another solo podcast. So I do apologize for the length of period between these and the fact that I wasn't able to get the guests together. But we will get those out another time. I have the next couple of podcasts lined up for you guys. But let's just talk about games. You know, we're at the end of January. Typically a slow month for both video games and for movies. Understandably, you know, the economy is pretty hungover after Christmas. So, like places aren't hiring in January. YouTubers don't get a lot of ad revenue in January because, you know, all the ad agencies blew all their load in November and December. So January is just slow for like everything. Anything, you don't see anything, really exciting happen in January. There's, very few sports high profile, going on outside the football, playoffs and the college playoff. But, that's only for a couple of weeks out of this month. And then February is the Super Bowl. And then March is absolutely no sports worth watching. And we have to wait till spring training and baseball season in April. So let's talk about games, because I made my video on my top 15 most anticipated video games for 2017. And with the new year, everything's always nice to A, reflect on the past year, and B, to look forward to what the rest of the year has to come. And with January being very slow, when it comes to movies and video games, there wasn't much. There was only one hit that came out this month that was, well, at least for me personally, Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue that came out on the 24th, which I played the fragmentary passage, the new content with Aqua, and boy, I'm not gonna spoil anything. The entire VOD of that playthrough is on YouTube as well, and Twitch for now on Twitch, because I have it on YouTube, so I don't need to save it on Twitch. Tetsuya Nomura, man. That dude's a dude, and he does some things that make people angry. So I'm not going to go into depth about that, but the game handled beautifully, really gorgeous graphics, running on that Unreal Engine. I cannot fucking wait for Kingdom Hearts 3, but I know that's at the very least a couple years out, as is Final Fantasy VII Remastered, which is also being helmed by Mr. Nomura as well. But as we heard a couple of weeks ago, both of those projects are way in the future. Like, there are even worlds in Kingdom Hearts 3 that they haven't even thought about or created yet. So both of those games very, very much in the early stages. But there's a lot of games and even a console to anticipate for this year. There's a ton of PS4 games. PS4 is my secondary console. I play most of my games on Xbox for the exclusives, and if they are on both platforms, I'll go for Xbox, because that's where I have the most friends, and I think achievements are cool, and trophies, and all the other, Steam achievements, and, whatever Origin and Uplay, and sometimes Wii has some within their own games, but achievements was the first. They did it right, and people tried to copy them, but they didn't successfully. So I don't care about trophies. They're pretty useless, because there's like no numeric value to it. So I'm the bronze, whatever. If you like what you like, but achievements are just vastly superior. But on the PS4, I still got one, late. I didn't get it until the Uncharted bundle came out just over a year ago now. But I have 7 PS4 games, and on my top 15, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of my top 15 are PS4 exclusives. So it looks to be a pretty freaking awesome year for the PS4, whether that's your main console or secondary or even tertiary console. And of course, we have the Nintendo Switch coming out, which doesn't have a lot of games to really get excited about. In my top 15, there's only 2 that fell on the Switch. Fire Emblem Warriors, which will be coming out in the fall, and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, March 3rd, the same day the console comes out, but it also comes out on Wii U that day. I'm sure we'll have comparisons between how it handles on Wii U as well as Switch. We know that graphically Switch is superior, but it's only running, I think, at 900p. So, it's weird that Nintendo is still so behind the times when it comes to just everything when it comes to online, the whole friend code thing, that was a fiasco. And the way that Wii U held it, the UI was super slow and clunky and was limited to 100 friends, which sucks when you stream like me and you can only play. There are no like invites on the Wii U. You have to be friends with somebody in order to play with them. So that really sucks when I want to play Smash. I have to delete and add people constantly. I mean, sure, Xbox 360 only had 100 friends, but you could still invite people and have parties and chat. And with the Nintendo Switch, you need to have a mobile app in order to do the chat, which is like, I know I've harked on this many times before, but they're going gimmick over gameplay. You know, they think, oh, everyone's going to be taking the Switch to tea parties and sporting events, and it's going to be a huge social thing. It's going to be, you know, Wii Sports, except on the go with the whole 1-2-3 Switch video game, which, you know, is just a bunch of mini games they're definitely trying to be the next Wii Sports, but it isn't going to be Wii Sports because A, it's not Wii Sports, B, it's not the Wii, and C, it's just really kind of gimmicky. Maybe some of the things are fun. Yes, it's very entry-level stuff, so like an 80-year-old could pick up these really simple 2, 3, 5, 10-second games and maybe have some fun with it, much like, you know, we I think you've seen the Guinness Book of World Records, like this octogenarian that has the most perfect games in Wii bowling. And that was a way for some people to get active, and that whole change to video games definitely was unexpected. Not a lot of people thought that the Wii was going to be as successful as it was, and the fact that Wii Sports, best-selling game of all time now, granted, yes, it was bundled in, but that's only in America and Japan and everywhere, or I don't know about Europe, but at the very least in Japan, it was not bundled with the console. So, smaller crowd, I know, but at the very least, successful. It was a bit of a phenomenon. You couldn't get a Wii. I remember trying to get a Wii. I don't remember how long it took until I could get one. It was probably at least 6 months before I was able to finally find one. And, the Switch we heard this like 3-4 months ago. They've very much lowered their initial amount of consoles that they were going to have at launch. And I still believe there are some people that want the Switch but haven't been able to pre-order it because it's selling out on Amazon, Best Buy, and Walmart and Toys R Us. I don't know how many places have it for pre-order at this point in time. But hey, it's less than. I mean, it's almost a month away. You know, it's a month and 4 days away. Or a month and 5 days away, or 4 days as I'm watching this video. And that's crazy. That's crazy. But the lack of games is a little bit troubling. Granted, most consoles don't have spectacular launches. You know, there are a few consoles that stand out as having really good launches, and there are some of the best games of all time that have been on console launches. But there are historically a ton of weak, especially in the past couple of generations. Take a look at PS3 had a shit launch lineup. 360, very similar. You know, not a ton of amount of titles and not a lot of huge platforms. So Nintendo Switch, I'm not going to say it's the weakest or smallest launch titles of all time. And people are saying, oh, you think they're going to release their entire launch lineup this early? It's like, it's almost a month away. It's almost a month away. There's no, the Xbox One and the PS4 and the Wii U, we knew what their launch titles were a month, 2 months, even more so before the console came out. So I don't know why some people are, I don't know, they're just being super defensive for no reason, or they think that Nintendo's keeping a secret, which is going to hurt their bottom line because they want pre-orders. They want press. They want it to show we sold this many. And that's crazy. That gets them good press. That shows people, wow, a lot of people are getting this. Maybe I should get it too. It's always, you see that in box offices, which is why a lot of the bigger movies premiere overseas nowadays. You take a look at almost all of the biggest movies, all the Marvel and Disney and Universal projects, and Fox and Paramount, and almost all of the huge movies and franchises premiere overseas, because that way they can garner more hype. Like, oh my God, it did amazing in Europe, and now it comes out, you know, in 4 days in America. So, you know, get hype because it's doing so well over there, or in China or Bangladesh or India or, wherever they decide to premiere the movies, it's all about garnering hype. This is very opposite to how it was in the 90s and the early 2000s, where America always got the premieres because it was America. That's where the movies were made. That was the audience they were made for. But the climate has changed. I don't know if it's for the better. I'm not a movie economist. I don't know how these numbers translate, if it's a coincidence or what have you, but that is the way that it is right now. So it's all about garnering hype. Pre-order numbers are a huge thing. And those are things that you're not able to see all of them. Like digital pre-orders, quite often are not visible, to see. But when it comes to GameStop or, Walmart, Target, Best Buy pre-orders, a lot of those numbers quite often are visible, more so in Europe. Those numbers, or in Japan, Europe and Japan are way more easier to see the numbers of pre-orders. And that kind of reflects how well the game is going to do. You take a look at, say, a stable franchise that comes out all the time, Call of Duty. The Call of Duty titles that got the most pre-orders ended up selling the most. It's those were the titles that people wanted and were most excited for. And when you saw the pre-orders drop off, it's because they were lost faith in the franchise. And I think you probably also saw this in the Assassin's Creed titles once those started churning out every single year. And if you count like some of the other side games, even more than that, those pre-orders, I'm sure, if you take a look at the numbers, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure some of those pre-orders, after 3, maybe Black Flag didn't get as many pre-orders as 3 did because not a lot of people liked 3, or after Unity, there wasn't many pre-orders for Liberation, or maybe things have changed in how video games are marketed. And then you get into like review sites. That's a whole different subject and a different kind of beast for many reasons. We'll probably cover that in another podcast. Maybe we can get somebody who knows a thing or two about that. But there's a ton of information out there. We've had some articles and even some scandals about such things. But when it comes to marketing video games, pre-orders do mean a lot. And for consoles, that's very much the same beast there. So when it comes to Nintendo, we know that they are, for some reason, I don't know if this is a brilliant strategy or if it's stupid, probably a mix of both. They keep scarcity on a lot of things that they know people are going to want. The Wii sure was way more successful than many people thought. But And the PS2, that was really hard to get when that first came out. I remember being at a GameStop and then this one guy came in and was like, yo, you got my pre-order? And this guy's like, yeah, just follow me into the back room. Don't tell anybody. It was like a huge thing. People are trying to get all those PS2s. And the Wii was similar in that respect. That's the most recent kind of scarcity of a console that we've seen since the PlayStation 2. And you might say like, oh, this or this console or this thing is had a lot of people that wanted to get it but couldn't, not to the level that it was for the PS2, or I would say even more so for the Wii because of the phenomenon it was and the fact that they had produced so little consoles at launch, and a couple months thereafter it was still hard to get even after I got mine. So Nintendo loves to keep things scarce. You look at all of the like 3DS, the new 3DS models. This one has Zelda on it. This one's got Pikachu on it. This one's Fire Emblem. They seem to always have a low number of those because they always sell out instantly. And I don't know if it's because Nintendo wants it to be a rare thing. Therefore, it builds up more hype. It builds up more demand. And it incentivizes people to pre-order things when they see that they're still available, because they know that Nintendo has a track record of keeping things very scarce. So that ends up working out for Nintendo in the long run because they have that track record. So more people are more willing to pre-order because they feel that Nintendo is going to keep things scarce as they typically do, whether it be a certain model of the 3DS or a certain color variation of this controller, that console. We kind of see that back and forth. Whenever a console comes out, it's either black or it's white, and then the white version comes out if it's black, and oh my god, that's amazing, I need that. And if it started white and it comes out with the black edition, you're like, oh my god, it's great, I need that. And then take a look at like the GameCube and all those different color swaps, and the N64 with the translucence and the red, blue, purple. That thing had 1,000 different colors. I think we've all seen on like Twitter and Instagram and Tumblr and all those photo sites pictures of people's like N64 collections that have like all the different colors and all the different controllers. And that's cool and like collectible and stuff. And obviously Nintendo is a company that has a long, big fan following. You know, it's the company that's been around longer than anything else that's still making and producing both video games and consoles. You know, they started off as like a card game manufacturer and, you know, developed in video games, and they were one of the main factor, obviously, in digging the world out of that video game crash of the 80s. And Nintendo's been big ever since. Sure, you know, the N64 didn't sell as well as the PlayStation in many places, and the GameCube didn't do as well as the PS2, and it didn't have the graphics and the promise of the Xbox. But then the Wii came out and just blew everybody out of the water. Take a look at 360 and PS4. 360 was up to a big lead because it was cheaper and it came out earlier. But at the end, when the PS4 and the Xbox One came out, 360 and PS3 were pretty much on a level playing field. They were like within less than 1 million of each other. So they ended up evening out, but still nowhere close to what the Wii did, even though a lot of gamers out there, whether they be casual or hardcore or whatever you identify as, stop playing their Wii after a couple of months or a couple of years because either they were bored with the titles that they liked, or there wasn't a ton of titles that they liked, or they just stopped playing it in favor of playing games on the PS3 or the 360 for whatever reasons you have. Or maybe you just, you know, stuck to the DS or whatever handhelds is the PSP. Maybe you were really into that. I know I was. I had a ton of PSP games and I really loved that console, and the Vita was very disappointing in contrast because of the lack of game development for that game. So I don't see there being a sequel to the Vita. I don't see there being another Sony handheld in the future, which is a shame because you can do different things on that kind of a platform than you can on the 3DS, both graphically and control-wise, and of course IPs, obviously. And then you take a look at, I mentioned in my most anticipated games of the year, Days Gone, a PS4 exclusive done by the Sony Bend team, which had previously done my two favorite PSP games, Siphon Filter, Logan Shadow, and Siphon Filter, Dark Mirror. Reverse those order. It was Dark Mirror, then it was Logan Shadow. And they also did Golden Abyss for Uncharted, and that was my favorite PS Vita game for a while. And now they finally have a console game, so I'm excited for that. But because the platform that they had for success is now kind of gone. Vita hasn't had an announced game that wasn't just like a cross-buy between the PS3 and or the PS4 for a long time. And you take a look at E3, maybe there was a Vita title. It might have been one, but for the most part, none. And I think the year before there was definitely zero. So I don't see Sony going that route anymore. And then you have the Nintendo Switch, which is a console handheld hybrid, but it's definitely a main console. That's how most people are going to use it. Some people are like, oh sweet, I can take this on the plane. That's cool. For you, if you travel or you want it to be more mobile for whatever reason, that's super awesome for you guys. Obviously, some people thought that this would be replacing the Wii U and the 3DS. No. The Nintendo 3DS is still existing, and now it's the new 3DS, and obviously there'll be another Nintendo handheld probably out within the next 2 years, I would guess, based off of their track record, because like the new 3DS isn't like a brand new console, and then you have people saying that the Scorpio is like a brand new generation, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're not going to get into that right now, but that's just one of the developers said, but that's questionable in that regard. But as far as like the handheld goes, the the Switch is not replacing the 3DS. It's just replacing the Wii U, and most people are going to be playing it as a home console. I know I am. I don't know if I'll ever be playing it mobily. But I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. The battery life isn't going to be great. We know it's 2 to 4 hours depending on the game. And we know that Breath of the Wild, for instance, a game like that, which I would assume will be most of the games, you know, the Mario games, the Splatoons, whatever other Nintendo original IPs that finally get released on the Switch that either missed the Wii U or didn't have a good showing on the Wii U, like Star Fox or Metroid or F-Zero. God, we need a new F-Zero game. Come on, we haven't had one since the GameCube. The Wii didn't get one. The Wii U didn't get one. Oh man, just come on, give us. The last time this was commented on, I forget which Nintendo guy said, "Oh, we can't think of anything new." It's like I don't need anything new. You know, I don't need a different mechanic. Give me the same driving mechanics, or tweak a little bit. Give me the same tracks, new tracks, mix of both, same music, new music, remixed music. You can have a story, you can not have a story. I don't care. I want F-Zero. We haven't had it in so long. There's a demand there. There's a little bit of a void, but we know that Nintendo doesn't always, they don't always fulfill the dreams of people. There'd be like the Metroid fans who haven't had a game that they've enjoyed in quite some time. We had that Federation Force on the 3DS that everyone was super disappointed about, because it wasn't like a real Metroid game, and Other M on the Wii disappointed a lot of people in what it did with the story with Samus as well as the gameplay. But like the Metroid Prime games did very well, and we haven't had a side-scrolling one in a long time, which were the ones that I liked. I wasn't big into the Metroid Primes. I only tried the first one for a couple of hours. Granted, that's, I didn't give it the fairest of shots in the world, but I know a lot of people did enjoy that gameplay and those stories. So it's like, give us a new Metroid game. Give us a fucking Star Fox game that doesn't use stupid, tilty, bullshitty controls with stupid, broken boss battles. They tried to hey, look, it's just like Star Fox 64, except shitty in every aspect. It didn't take any of the good stuff from Star Fox 64 outside of, there being mostly planes, but the tank, that's fine. We mostly enjoyed the tank in Star Fox 64, but that whole crane and ostrich mode, we don't need that. We don't need that. Just give us what made the Star Fox 64 good. Give us what made Metroid Fusion and Metroid Prime good, and give us what made F-Zero GX good. When Nintendo is very different in how they approach game development, first they have a gameplay idea, and then they decide what kind of game it's going to be. There are so many Mario games that originally didn't start out as Mario games. And Kirby's Epic Yarn, that wasn't originally a Kirby game. That was originally, they had a concept about a world of yarn and how those mechanics worked, and then it eventually became a Kirby game. And we also have different things like Doki Doki Panic becoming, Super Mario 2. And they just approach things a lot differently over there, which comes with both the good and the bad. We get really innovative things like what we saw with Mario Sunshine with the flood, and that was really cool. I liked Mario Sunshine, and hopefully Odyssey, as it seems, is kind of going more back to a Sunshine feel than compared to a Mario Galaxy feel, which had its moments, but at its core wasn't the Mario game that I wanted, in contrast to Mario 64, which is a lot of people's golden standard of a Mario game, obviously with nostalgia goggles on, or maybe they just really loved the speedrunning community, and that's a really big one because of all the different kind of glitches you can do there, and the difficulties with the camera, because it was really hard to introduce gamers to that kind of perspective. So they kind of had to use the Lakitu as to show, look, the Lakitu's holding the camera. That's how this is working. Because it was super duper brand new. And what they did with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, that was obviously new, groundbreaking stuff there. And it worked, and people loved it. And it laid the groundwork for so many other Nintendo and inspired other developers to make their own titles within a 3D world, and platforming and action and adventure and things like that. So Nintendo has had a lot of good. Some people saw the dual screens on the DS. They're like, what the fuck is this Game & Watch bullshit? And maybe even they still weren't impressed at the first, the launch titles or at the first couple of years, but then DS Lite comes out, it gets more usage out of the touchscreen, or less usage of the touchscreen. It's just able to give you more of the standard gameplay that you're used to from the Game Boy Advanced, and it worked. It worked when they used it. It worked when they didn't use it. Then they come out with 3D, which was, I stated before, just a flash in the pan. It was just a gimmick. And the 3D, we don't even see being used almost at all in 3DS titles anymore. And they kind of got a little late on the 3D gimmick thing, even though like sometimes on like Kirby Triple Deluxe, I think the 3D looks really cool, but only in certain aspects. So they do try a lot of different things, and sometimes we end up getting some amazing stuff, and sometimes we get some pretty incredible flops. And even sometimes when it's successful, like with the Wii and the motion controls and the Wii Sports, when they tried to implement motion control into Twilight Princess and other games, it didn't work because the motion control wasn't that great. But then you get the Wii Motion Plus and it's more one-to-one, but it's still not the kind of gameplay that people A, are used to with that particular franchise, or B, they just didn't like having to wave this stick around for some games. For some, it worked. For some, you didn't use it a ton. Or when you had to point at the screen with the infrared sensor and, hit the Z trigger or whatever, some of those aspects didn't work fairly well. Sometimes it worked all right. Sometimes it worked, as well as it needed to. And sometimes it was pretty cool. But for the most part, it's hard to get people to adopt something new when it comes to a franchise that they're familiar with. But sometimes we get really cool stuff out of that. No matter what Mario title you like, you've liked something that was groundbreaking, new, and or risky, or other, Nintendo franchises out there. You take a huge thing like Metroid, which, you had Metroid, you had Metroid 2, and you had Super Metroid, and you had Metroid Fusion and Metroid Zero Mission, and those were all great. And then boom, they bring it into first person. You're like, whoa, that's a drastic change. I personally wasn't on board with it, which is maybe why I had a bit of a prejudice when I first started playing the first game. But I'm sure a lot of people were also, whoa, why are you changing this amazing side-scroller into a first-person shooter? And they end up super duper loving it. And still trying to find some of those games on the Wii is really hard because some of, especially like the collections, are like just scarce. Kind of like Xenoblade. Xenoblade on the Wii. They didn't print a ton of those copies, and yet those are sometimes still pop up fairly expensive. People like those games. Now we're getting a Xenoblade 2, even though there's Xenoblade Chronicles. I don't even know how well that sold, but I know it took you a long time to get to the mech for the amount of hours that you would put in, but that's a JRPG for you. So some people are super excited for Xenoblade 2 or Super Mario Odyssey if they're just a big Mario head or they like the direction that it's going in. It's definitely different. It's not like Grand Theft Auto Mario or, something like that. So some people are kind of getting that impression. That was just like one of the worlds, a New York-esque metropolitan area where, they had, Mario, which up till now we thought was a normal sized human, all of a sudden being up next to actual, like normal looking ish humans, as far as you can get on a Nintendo family friendly video game. So like that's obviously a weird difference of contrast there, for a number of reasons, obviously, but it's definitely new and different, and also kind of bringing it back to a more of a 3D open-ish world game for Mario, which we didn't get much on the Wii. Obviously, Mario Galaxy did very, very well, and then they had the Super Mario 3D worlds in the Wii U, who did exceptionally well, and Super Mario Brothers, those went back to side scrollers, which some people is like, oh, I want more 3D. And then they ended up loving this, or, oh, great, I'm glad it's back to side scrolling. And then they loved it or they didn't love it. So Mario changes a lot. He has his finger in a lot of pies, all the sports games and Mario Party games, which, the one on the Wii U did terrible with the way that they changed the Game Boy. It's no longer a Game Boy movie. You all are moving in a boat, and a lot of the games were stupid. So, yeah, sometimes their gambles don't pay off, but sometimes they do. And I hope the Switch isn't another gamble like the Wii U. They did something different, which was also one of their downfalls of not keeping up with the times. They're like, hey, you have this gamepad, and now you can use that as with tilt controls and use it as a camera for Star Fox and totally break the goddamn game. Or you have to look up at the screen and then down at up in the TV and then the screen for some games. But for other games, you didn't need it, or you could only use it if you wanted to, either as a controller, or something you use Pro Controller, or GameCube for Smash Brothers, or oftentimes you would only use it as like a start menu or a map, and it's kind of cool that way if you're playing like Hyrule Warriors or Mario. Maker to use the stylus and all that cool stuff. It had uses that were very unique, obviously, and cool, but there are also times where the gamepad was definitely not the right direction to go. So that was 2 generations in a row where they kind of threw formalities out the window, which, as I've mentioned many times, sometimes worked, sometimes didn't, but it was a drastic change. You know, we had this Nintendo, Super Nintendo, N64, GameCube, normal controllers. They introduced the first analog stick, the N64, and the GameCube. People are still using the GameCube controllers, obviously with, you know, Smash Brothers and all obviously games that are still on the GameCube. And people we were used to just normal controllers, and the Wii comes out with this 2-fangled nunchuck Wiimote thing, and it's weird. Some games it just felt normal, like any other controller, but it was 2 separate things. And in other cases, the games were made with those controls in mind, which harkens back to what I mentioned before of how Nintendo approaches a gameplay idea and then works around that. They don't go, okay, let's make a new Yoshi game. No, they don't really start off that way. Obviously, some are like, okay, we need to make a new Mario game. Obviously, because Mario sells in every single aspect. He's very, very successful. Take a look at the numbers. He has the best selling games and is successful in almost every single iteration that he has, whether they get, you know, good or amazing or decent or bad reviews. They profit off of Mario, which is why, you know, we had the president of Japan pop out of a warp pipe during the closing ceremony of the Olympics as Mario, you know, for Japan, who will be hosting the next Olympics. And that's going to be a big thing. We know they're building a Nintendo World and they're Universal, and now in LA's Universal is going to get some like Nintendo stuff too. So yeah, Mario is a pretty big thing, pretty big deal. And we got Mario Run, which was the first Nintendo handled mobile platform game, because Niantic, you know, did Pokemon Go. And now they have the whole Pokemon Duels thing, which throws a wrench in some people's ideas of Pokemon Stars coming to the Switch. That would be disappointing. The Switch needs a lot of what worked in the past and also stay away from what didn't work on the Wii and the Wii U. Obviously, we have more of a normal controller. Obviously, you can detach the Joy-Cons and do all that other kind of stuff, but seems like most games will be playable on the normal Switch, you know, puppy dog face looking controller. And we also have a Pro controller, which is like $70. Jesus Christ. That was not what it cost for the Wii or the Wii U. And that's a bummer, but depending on what kind of games I want to play, maybe I'll invest in getting that. But we're not going to be, I feel like, as handcuffed with, you know, motion controls as we were with the Wii, and in some cases, the Wii U, with all that tilting gyroscopic nonsense. Obviously, there are gyroscopes in the Joy-Cons, and they're supposed to be really cool with the whole, like, glasses in a cubes, ice cubes in a glass example. It made sense in my mind. I was like, oh, I could definitely imagine what that would feel like, and if it is that good, then that's pretty cool. But I don't need that in my video games. There's very few instances where it's like I could see where that would come in handy, enhance the gameplay and or the immersion and or how things were controlled. Like in the Vita had a touchpad on the back, and the only time I ever saw a use of it where I was like, that was pretty clever and pretty neat was on Uncharted Golden Abyss, where you would do a rubbing of a hieroglyph or something. You know, you would see some sort of design on, you know, made of stone, and you take a piece of paper and a crayon and do your rubbing. And so you would have a copy of it per se, you know, without having to take a picture or something like that. And I was like, oh, that was kind of cool, because you would touch the touch screen as you would a crayon to make that rubbing. So I was like, oh, that was neat. That's something that you wouldn't be able to really do without the touchscreen. It didn't add anything to the gameplay. You could have done that with an analog stick or with a D-pad or by hitting a button. But it was just like, hey, that's kind of neat, but wholly unnecessary in every single way, shape, or form when it comes to like the cost that, you know, to put that on the controller and how useful or how many times you use it and how cool it is. in the games is just completely desynced with one another. Totally not worth the cost, not worth the added addition. But sometimes it's like, hey, that's kind of neat. And we saw some of that with the Wii, but most of those games controls were designed around the Wiimote and or the nunchuck. And some of those were kind of neat ideas, like using, them both as a rifle for, Call of Duty 3, I think was the one that first came out. And I was like, oh, that seems like a cool idea, that it's like you're holding the gun, or you're playing Link and you're using it like as a bow and arrow, or, Wii Sports Resort are also using it as a bow and arrow. So like that's kind of cool, but wholly unnecessary. I would very much not have that experience and just give me more of a stable control-based gameplay in all of the other games. It is different, and sometimes, hey, it's really cool, it's nifty, it's clever, but us, the gamers that either grew up in Nintendo or are more into PS4 games, Xbox One games, no matter what genre you care about, the Wii and the Wii U were not well suited for many of those titles. Sometimes they give us something cool, like in Madden 09, I think it was, for the Wii, that was the only Madden version where you would use the Wiimote to create your own wide receiver routes on the fly. And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. I like that. I would have loved the game without it, but like that was kind of cool. But when it comes to like the rest of the controls for a lot of games, it didn't handle better than a controller. Sometimes it was the same. But other times it was worse, especially when you were forced to use the controllers in a certain way. Sometimes it was cool, sometimes it worked perfectly, sometimes it worked out just as well as you would expect. But sometimes it definitely didn't work, and those sometimes that it didn't work were quite often frustrating and just not worth it in many cases. So yeah, the Wii and the Wii U had some successes. They had amazing titles on those consoles, but not enough of them. And that harkens back to the point of Nintendo not releasing a lot of their titles that aren't Mario. We want a good Star Fox game. We want a Metroid game that's Metroid. We want a F-Zero game that's F-Zero, or, a mainline Pokemon game. That would be so cool. When we heard that rumor, it almost seemed like, that'll never happen. I don't know why they wouldn't do it. It'd be such a great idea. You aren't taking away a game from the 3DS and your super successful handheld, which is more successful than the PS4 or the Xbox One ever will be with, the 3DS. It's just the third iteration, and we still have some promise for it because people have been able to up the resolution on Pokemon Sun and Moon up to higher res models on their characters, and as well as upscale the resolution of the game as a whole. So it seems like, this seems like it was kind of built to all of a sudden become better. Obviously, that wouldn't happen on the 3DS. So it does seem to have promise for the Switch. And I think that'd be really cool. I would definitely get it. It'd be a way that I can actually stream a legit, copy of a Pokemon game on say Twitch, or, record it for YouTube, where before you would either have to like pirate it on, your PC, which is obviously easy to do and finagle, tons of different ways you can do that, or get somebody to mod your 3DS to able to capture from it. So that'd be cool for me personally. And also, people love Pokemon. Pokemon's still so huge right now, even though Pokemon Go, I feel like, is super duper stagnant because we don't have Gen 2. We need more Pokemon to catch. We've pretty much caught them all at this point. I'm only missing Lapras and Porygon, and obviously the regional character Pokemon and the Pokemon that haven't been released. And those Gen 2 Pokemon that you can only get from eggs, I've only gotten Cleffa and Elekid. So I've done almost all that I can do. I mean, give me a Porygon and a Lapras, and I've pretty much done everything that I'm in control of, somewhat. So, but Pokemon is still huge, so I think like more Pokemon the better. Nintendo's really good at releasing a lot of Pokemon games. That we have the mystery dungeons, and a lot of us really start to forget that Detective Pikachu is still a thing, and that's going to become a movie, and we don't know what that is, going to be coming west. But Pokemon is a thing that they realize makes money, so they make a lot of different kinds of games for it on all of their platforms. But there's, also a ton of other games and titles that we would like to see sequels to, reimaginings of. I'm not super into reboots, unless they're like the Lara Croft reboot, which was just a complete change, not just a glorified remastered. It's like, oh, it's just this up-resed graphics, which is fine. Like the whole DuckTales thing that a lot of people love, that sold a ton of copies. That was a remastered version of the original. That's super cool. I have no problems with them doing that of other older games, but they're still behind on a lot of things when it comes to the power, the processing power that this console can handle. Obviously, it's gonna be better than the Wii U, and the graphics. Obviously, we don't expect Nintendo with how they deal things. They like small consoles. They like it cute and portable and accessible, and colorful sometimes. We don't expect it to compete with the Xbox One or the PS4, let alone the PS4 Pro and the Xbox Scorpio. We don't expect it graphically to keep up to them, but having once again almost no storage. Like if you download Zelda Breath of the Wild onto your Nintendo Switch, that's something like 79% of your memory or 80% of your memory, something like that. That's like ludicrous. One normal title takes up almost the entirety of your game's memory. That's ludicrous. Oh, you can expand it with cards. Yeah, that you have to pay for, that costs a ton of money. Obviously, and there doesn't sound like there's going to be outside expansion like you can with portable hard drives for the PS4 or the Xbox One. That doesn't seem like that's going to be a thing that A, Nintendo would allow to be a thing, and B, something that they would do because that's just way too modern. That's just way too much with the times. Like with the Wii, oh, people don't have HD TVs. We won't make our games HD. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? That just doesn't make any sense. They're just so behind the times. And once again, with their online thing, sure, it's always been free. It's always been, hasn't been as good when it comes to the connection that you have with Xbox Live or PlayStation Network. And the services have always also been limited as well. And we know that Nintendo is very notorious with their pricing. You try to buy any of the latest, no matter how old, any of the latest Mario or, Nintendo original IPs, those games like never go on sale. If you buy the last Zelda game, it's probably still $50. If you buy the last Mario game, it's probably still $50, $40, at the lowest. So they aren't great with their price models, so I wouldn't expect amazing sales to happen on the Switch like we see on Xbox Live and PSN and Steam and, all those other places. But they're going to have an online service that you're going to have to pay for, which is fine with me as long as it's as good as the other services I pay for. But the fact that voice chat, you have to have a cell phone to do it, is like just, if it works perfectly, whatever, it's still an extra step that I don't want to do. That just gives us more problems. We have to worry about its connection. We have to worry about battery life and all the other good shit that we get with adding more ingredients into the mixture. There's just more things that can go wrong that we don't need. It can be integrated into a console. We've had it with the PS4, PS3, Xbox One, Xbox 360, and obviously PC. So Nintendo is definitely behind the times on that. But hey, we're going to be getting a free Super Nintendo or Nintendo game every month, but it's only for that month, and you have to pay for it. It's like, that's very Nintendo of them. So there are a lot of reasons not to pre-order the Switch, mostly due to their lack of titles, but I still pre-ordered one. I want to play Breath of the Wild on the Switch. Maybe I'll get Splatoon just because I'll be bored of only having one game on the Switch when that finally comes out. Because their launch titles are pitiful, absolutely pitiful. Just the sheer amount of ports that they're getting is just ridiculous. Some of them are like Game of the Year or, ultra editions of those games. And sometimes they have a little bit of extra content, but they're still ports. Obviously, the Switch happened very fast, so we can understand that not a lot of studios were initially interested because of the lack of the success that the Wii U had, which had like nothing from EA, and now EA out the gate is saying that they're going to be giving us FIFA on the Switch, which, soccer, cool, I guess. So we can understand why there isn't as many games, because they kind of fast-tracked this console pretty quick because they saw the fledgling console that the Wii U was. So not a lot of companies had time. Not a lot of developers had time to get on board, or B, start to develop a game, let alone a console exclusive. So it is understandable. But once again, like I've always said when it comes to the quote-unquote console wars, it only matters about the games. Obviously, the Wii and other Nintendo products haven't gotten as many ports of games that were made for the PS4 or PlayStations and Xboxes that then get ports to either the PlayStation or the Xbox, whatever one they weren't developed on. A lot of those get mass releases, say like Ubisoft games, EA games, other titles out there, BioWare games. There are a ton of studios that will have games for both of those consoles that will just neglect the Wii or the Wii U because the lack of power that it has, or the fact that it's more difficult to develop a game on, or the fact that it doesn't make economic sense because they don't have as big of an install base, or they just don't sell as many copies there, so it's not worth the amount of money that would cost to make the game for that. So hopefully the Switch can, fix that problem when it comes to third-party titles, but it's still the first-party titles that absolutely matter the most when it comes to either Xbox or PlayStation or any Nintendo system. It's all about first-party titles. That's what sells consoles. You don't necessarily need a killer app in most cases. Sometimes you do, it depends on the platform. VR very well may be contingent upon that, but that's just a completely different beast, and we won't get into that. But Wii Sports was the killer app for Wii. It didn't, I don't know if it needed to be, because that console might have done very well without it, but it absolutely was the driving force for so many people getting it and why it was so hard to get out the get-go. But the Wii U didn't really have that. Some people were super excited about Splatoon because that was the first original IP from Nintendo since Wii Fit. And then Wii had Wii Fit as their new thing after, first they had Wii Sports, then they had Wii Fit. Nintendo, or the Wii U had Splatoon, did really well. They made money off of that. It sold a lot. A lot of people are wondering, is Splatoon 2 really a sequel? Because it doesn't really seem like, based off of what we see in the additional content that they highlighted, it might have been a small adjustment that they made towards the end. Because it looked like much with Mario Kart 8 that it was just going to be just a little remastered port with some extra goodies. But then they decided, let's just call it Splatoon 2, even though it's really Splatoon 1.5 because it markets better. So you can get kind of mad at that or annoyed at that, and B, you can also kind of understand that. So the Switch has some problems that will be in its future, but I'm looking forward to some of the titles that we know are going to be coming out this year and that we can figure will be coming out in the future, either it be third-party support, third-party exclusives, or obviously first-party exclusives. But super psyched. Can't wait to see more of Spider-Man, Ni no Kuni 2, Revenant Kingdom, God of War. I want to see more of that. That probably gets pushed to next year. Uncharted Lost Legacy, Star Wars Battlefront 2. I love the first one, regardless of the lack of single-player content. Mentioned Days Gone, Detroit Become Human. Hope that doesn't become canceled. Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. That beta starts in a few days. Hope I get into that. Hope it's good. Don't know. It's Ubisoft. That's a flip of the coin, that studio there. Or I know there's dozens of Ubisoft studios, but that developer. Horizon Zero Dawn. That comes out in a month from now. Excited about that. Well, curious about what Destiny 2 may be. Mentioned Fire Emblem Warriors. Breath of the Wild. Kingdom Hearts 2.8 came out. I needed to play Dream Drop Distance. Then I'll have played all the Kingdom Hearts games, and that'll be great, and I need to watch the back cover. Last of Us Part 2, if that comes out this year, that's going to be super hype, and of course, Mass Effect Andromeda, which is less than 2 months away, and I am so excited to be playing some of that game. But also, there's great movies to look forward to. All the superhero movies, My Little Pony's movies finally coming out after being announced a few years ago. We got some reboot sequels, I don't know what you want to call things, like Blade Runner 2049, We got, the DC movies that might be hanging on by a thread, like Wonder Woman and Justice League. And then you have like the Cloverfield movie, God Particle, or whatever title it's going to be changed to. And there's stuff like Ghost in the Shell. So people are like, hey, whitewashing. But I also hope it's good. And then there's, some things like Dunkirk, which is Christopher Nolan's next movie. So that's the selling point right there. I don't need to hear more. You got Logan, which looks amazing. And then obviously the Last Jedi, because Star Wars. And that's pretty cool. So a lot of things to look forward to this year. A lot of questions that we can speculate on, but at the core of it, want them to be answered. Whether it be video game releases, how good the Switch is, getting release dates for other games that we know probably aren't coming to come out this year, and in movies and in books and anime, and finally getting Attack on Titan Season 2, and One Punch, that's probably like at least a year out before that comes out. It's Season 2, but it was announced a couple of months ago. So always good stuff to look forward to, which is basically all we can really do in January and most in February when it comes to video games and movies and most other aspects, because that's just how years start. That's how it is. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Still don't know what to call this thing. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments. I'll glance over them and then say, these people don't know what they're talking about. Or maybe you're a genius and I'll just steal it and not give you any monetary compensation. Because, hey, I don't. Anyways, have a good one, folks, and thanks for listening. We'll have the next podcast up, hopefully, in the next week with some guests.